The way the ancients looked at the world was that it was indicating an implicate order. In other words, everything that you saw on the surface indicated something underneath. So they saw it as indeed signs indicating something else. Just as you see a tree, if you understand anything about trees, you realize that the only reason the tree exists is because it has this massive root structure underneath the ground that you can't see. Now, once that root structure becomes seen, the tree dies. You see, the tree dies. So the unseen world is really the source of the seen world. The unseen world cannot come into the seen world, because if it did, the seen world has to disappear. And so when you look at the seen world, what you're really supposed to be recognizing is what are the roots of the seen world. The roots of the seen world are the unseen world. That's the real meaning behind the world. And the thing about trees, people don't realize this, but the root structure is actually more important than the tree. Because what trees do is they keep the earth, they actually hold down soil. Like mountains. You know, the Quran says the mountains are pegs. Mountains actually prevent the world from shaking. And this is something known in modern geology. So what you see of the mountain, what's more important is not the seen part of the mountain, it's the unseen part of the mountain. The fact that it's a watad, deep into the earth. But you're only seeing the outward and you think that's amazing. Well, you haven't even seen the root. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ said that the tree that was most like the believer was the palm tree, because it didn't have any roots. In other words, it wasn't deeply planted in the material world. And yet it's this extraordinary tree that does all this wonderful, while it's here, it does all these wonderful things. So the two of them say that the modern world, see, what they say is if you went to a museum and saw a painting by Michelangelo, the question that most people going there will ask themselves is, what is the painter trying to tell me? What's the meaning of this painting? Or if you heard a poem, you could say the same thing. What is the poet trying to tell me? He just didn't make up this stuff. There's something he's trying to convey, a message. Well, what the modern analysis is not meaning. What's the painting made of? Well, it's made out of canvas. What's that material? Well, it's made out of fibers. What's that material? Well, it's made out of these molecules. And what's the actual colors from? Well, those are light reflections, and this one's at a certain frequency, and that's why the yellow is showing up, and the blue is at a certain frequency. And so they analyze the painting not for its meaning, but just to explain what it's made up of. And that is the same way that they look at the modern world. They look out there and they want to just analyze everything, but they never tell you what it means. They break it down. It's to reduce things to their components. And then we feel like we've achieved an understanding of the thing. Well, if you take a human being and take out their eyes, take off their ears, take off their hair, dissect them, open up their interior, examine their kidneys and their liver and all these things, do you understand what a human being is? Has that given you knowledge of what a human being is? Well, it's given you a certain knowledge about something about human beings, that they're composed of flesh and blood, and they have hair, and they have liver and kidneys, and the kidney does this, and the liver does that. That's a certain type of, but does that tell you about a human being that can think, that can speak, that can write poetry, that can paint pictures, that can play an instrument, that can do all these extraordinary things? It doesn't tell you anything about that human being. Why does he need to do those things? Why do human beings even pursue such pursuits? So that is the idea of trying to understand signs, is to look beyond this superficial realm. And then he gives this hadith of the Prophet ﷺ walking through a town with some companions, and he met an old and decrepit woman from one of the tribes who was making wool into thread with a spinning wheel. He greeted her and began speaking to her. He asked her if she had faith in God. She replied that she did. The Prophet asked her why. She said that the spinning wheel does not turn unless there is a hand to turn it. And the heavens cannot turn unless someone is turning them. The Prophet looked at his companions and said, you should have the religion of old women. You see, that's called Iman al-Ajaiz. That's faith. And there's another story of Fakhruddin al-Razi, who was walking with some of his students, and an old woman saw him, and she was amazed at how all these students were fluttering around him. And she said, who's that? And one of the students said, you don't know who that is? He has 1,000 proofs for the existence of God. And she laughed and said, if he didn't have 1,000 doubts for his non-existence, she wouldn't need 1,000 proofs for his existence. And when Fakhruddin al-Razi heard that, he said, you should have the faith of old women.